Hypothalamus artificial intelligence, HI. Digital transformation powered by real-time autonomous and intelligent algorithms. Presents the short conference, Artificial Neural Nets and Mathematical Artificial Neural Nets. It corresponds to one of several short conferences, in which the advances of HI research are presented, on the topic of artificial brains and decision-making artificial intelligence. The list of short introductory lectures to decision-making artificial intelligence are presented in the picture. Artificial neural nets and mathematical artificial neural nets. Traditional artificial intelligence, based on artificial neural nets, ANN, and support vector machines, SVM, has concentrated its efforts on imitating the mental models of human beings in the recognition of patterns. Modeling efforts, coupled with today's great computational power, have enabled a great development in pattern recognition, definitively surpassing the human capacity for such activity. However, being a mental intelligence older than mathematics and creative, which has grown in the human being based on elements other than science, closer to empirical evidence, these characteristics are transferred to the scientific process of creating an artificial intelligence oriented to mental intelligence. Because of this, its growth has been slow than it would have been, if we had a scientific basis for mental intelligence. Within a nervous system, a neuron is an electrically excitable cell that fires electrical signals called action potentials through a neural network. The neuron is the main component of nervous tissue in all animals. Neurons communicate with other cells through synapses, specialized connections that commonly use minute amounts of chemical neurotransmitters, to pass the electrical signal from the presynaptic neuron to the target cell, across the synaptic gap. Neurons are highly specialized for the processing and transmission of cellular signals. Given their diversity of functions performed in different parts of the nervous system, there is a wide variety in their shape, size, and electrochemical properties. For instance, the soma of a neuron can vary from 4 to 100 micrometers in diameter. An artificial neuron is a mathematical function conceived as a model of biological neurons. Artificial neurons are elementary units in an artificial neural network. The artificial neuron receives one or more inputs, representing excitatory postsynaptic potentials and inhibitory postsynaptic potentials at neural dendrites, and sums them to produce an output, or activation, representing a neuron's action potential which is transmitted along its axon. Usually each input is separately weighted, and the sum is passed through a nonlinear function known as an activation function, or transfer function. The transfer functions usually have a sigmoid shape, but they may also take the form of other nonlinear functions, piecewise linear functions, or step functions. They are also often monotonically increasing, continuous, differentiable, and bounded. An artificial neural net is based on a collection of connected artificial neurons, which loosely model the neurons of a biological brain. Each connection, like the synapses in a biological brain, can transmit a signal to other neurons. An artificial neuron receives signals, then processes them, and can send to neurons connected to it. The signal at a connection is a real number, and the output of each neuron is computed by some nonlinear function of the sum of its inputs. The connections are called edges. Neurons and edges typically have a weight that adjusts as learning proceeds. The weight increases or decreases the strength of the signal at a connection. Neurons may have a threshold such that a signal is sent only if the aggregate signal crosses the threshold. Defining parameters and topology is a combination of empirical work and scientific work, but there is no mathematical theory that must be respected. The algorithmic process is cyclical, and its convergence is based on the minimization of errors. Starting from the perceptron, the first artificial neuron created, the knowledge of neuronal modeling has evolved, currently having multiple types of artificial neural nets, specialized in performing specific pattern recognition. For this, the basic patterns of ANNs are modified. Convolutional artificial neural nets. They correspond to ANNs specialized in identifying certain types of patterns, such as images. The image presents an example of an ANN oriented to recognize images of numbers written freehand. The result is a discrete indicator associated to the number read. Starting from the perceptron, the first artificial neuron created, the knowledge of neuronal modeling has evolved, currently having multiple types of artificial neural nets. Convolutional artificial neural nets. They correspond to ANN specialized in identifying certain types of patterns, such as images. The image presents an example of an ANN oriented to recognize images of numbers written freehand. The result is a discrete indicator associated to the number read. This new type of neuron will be called mathematical artificial neuron. Its name was derived from the fact that the neuron is built, based on mathematical models that represent a system, and that it does contains logical or intuitive elements. The mathematical artificial neuron is a mathematical model, presumably of optimization, which results from the partitioning and decomposition of a monolithic problem into an atomized model, following the mathematical laws of large-scale mathematical modeling. Two mathematical artificial neurons communicate with each other, forming a network of mathematical artificial neurons. Communication occurs in two directions between the two neurons. The communication protocol between the two neurons is defined by mathematical laws developed to solve atomized problems. The modeler can choose the protocol, but not the communication process, which for optimization is based on the scientific laws of duality theory, and for equilibrium problems in mathematical programming with equilibrium constraints, PEC, methodologies. A mathematical neuron represents a robot, which can communicate with another robot, autonomously, since it knows the mathematical rules that it must respect. This is what happens in the human brain, where autonomic systems communicate with each other to make decisions. The mathematical artificial neuron is the technological evolution from the biological neuron, typical of mental intelligence, to the neurons necessary to represent mathematical intelligence, which until now are not produced by the human being. The mathematical artificial neuron is the technological evolution from the biological neuron, typical of mental intelligence, to the neurons necessary to represent mathematical intelligence, which until now are not produced by the human being. Like all mathematics, theory is cadent, and for those of us who already work in high-complexity mathematical modeling, it is the logical step we must take. It's just widening the look, and thinking a little outside the box. The mathematical artificial neuron is a mathematical superstructure, representing a complete system. A mathematical artificial neuron network can be a neuron of a larger mathematical artificial neuron network. This law of transitivity is typical of large-scale modeling. A large-scale system can be represented by a mathematical artificial neuron, and covers multiple subsystems, where each of them can be represented by a mathematical artificial neuron. Using large-scale methodologies, the mathematical artificial neuron can be divided into two, or more, mathematical artificial neurons, forming a mathematical network of artificial neurons. This process can be repeated, until the smallest mathematical artificial neurons, the atoms of the system, are obtained. An artificial hypothalamus is a network of mathematical artificial neurons. Each of them represents a system or subsystem. The difference with large-scale methodologies is that the solution is visualized as specialized communications between mathematical problems, while in the artificial hypothalamus the process is cooperative based on autonomy, distributed, and real-time processing. In addition, there is a standardized language for communications between mathematical artificial neurons. Any type of organization can be represented following these principles. The case of a poultry production system is presented. The system has been divided into 6 subsystems, which together make up the poultry production system. Enrique Krauss in the prologue of Cyber Leviathan, wrote, "Artificial intelligence is restructuring human life in unimaginable ways. With it, certain occupations in which we consider human intellectual and emotional capacity indispensable will end up becoming extinct, replaced by incredibly complex systems capable of emulating it. This makes our situation very different from that of 2 centuries ago. This time the machine will be able to completely replace the human being with his physical and cognitive abilities, and with this he could inevitably deprive a very high percentage of the population of work experience, which has been an essential element in human identity." Thank you for your attention.